Hello, good people of Room 8. Today we start to take a look at the world of payroll. And what payroll is the records of money, wages, salaries that are paid to employees. All of you at some time or another have been or will be on somebody's payroll and receive pay for the work services that you perform. So we're going to take a look at the vocabulary that's involved with that, and then a lot of the calculations that are required to keep track of payroll. We're going to start out real simple using Excel to look at some of the fundamentals, and then later on we'll get into deductions and the math calculations that are involved with that. Before you begin, the best way to start is to go ahead and go to my Quizlet and look for the payroll set that'll be in your class. And so you'll want to spend some time on that before you actually do the Excel lesson that's coming up. So go ahead and go into Quizlet, pause this video, spend some time, go through these at least 3 times, learning about payroll and some of these other words, compensation, gross earnings, time and a half pay. There are a total of, 10 here? So 11 terms. So you want to spend some time learning those before you move on, because once we start doing the activity, you'll be expected to know what these mean so that you can do the calculations. So go ahead and pause the video, spend some time in Quizlet, and then come on back here and open up Excel, and we will create a new workbook. Let's go ahead and minimize Quizlet and move over to Excel and start a blank workbook. And once you've started that workbook, you're going to create 3 different pages. And so step number 1 is to create a page, and here's your title of it right here, monthly earnings. The second page is gross earnings. And you might have noticed that I went ahead and labeled these with page numbers. So there's 2 space gross earnings. And then 3 is problems. So go ahead and take a minute to get those 3 pages created. And those should be 3 blank pages labeled monthly earnings, gross earnings, and problems. Once you've got that done, you can go ahead and create page 1, which is monthly earnings. And this is just a look at some typical median annual incomes, yearly incomes. Let me zoom in a little bit for you there so it's easy for you to create that. In fact, what we can just put here is we will put, let's just call that earnings for selected occupations. There we go. So we've got 10 of them here: software engineer, janitors, loan officers, and this is current data. And like I said, these are median, what they call median incomes. Half the people make above this number, and half the people in this field make below this number. So this is the middle earnings level for this particular occupation. And so what you're going to do is go ahead and get those listed and format these columns. I think that, let me see what I've got here for this width here. That's at 14. This one's a little bit wider to accommodate the occupation. And then our line numbers are centered. We used accounting format for our values. And that will be the same for these also. You'll want to use that accounting format. Right there. So go ahead and pause the video or whatever you need to do so that you can see this, set it off to a separate side of the screen, and go ahead and create monthly earnings worksheet number 1. And then we'll come back once you've got that completed and do some calculations here as far as converting these annual or yearly incomes into monthly earnings and weekly earnings. Assuming you have that worksheet done, let's go ahead and do a calculation. I'll do the first one and then you can go ahead and complete the rest of these. And once again, don't use any shortcuts at this point. You want to get the practice in to make sure that you've got the skill memorized. So to calculate monthly earnings, we are going to take our annual earnings and divide it by how many months in a year? 12. Very good. And that's it. So there you go, $8,165 a month. Weekly, we are going to take our annual earnings and divide it by the number of weeks in a year. How many weeks in a year? Yes, 52. And so there's the weekly earnings. Go ahead and calculate the monthly earnings and the weekly earnings for the remainder of these 9 occupations. Well, let's move on over to gross earnings. Now this worksheet's a little more involved. You can see there's a lot more here. These columns are all at a width of 14. The line column is centered. The straight time hours are centered. Accounting format. Anytime there are dollars here, we're in the accounting format. Indicated right there. All our hours are centered. And I believe we have 20 lines. Yes, we do, 20 lines. So I'm going to set this up so you can pause it and go ahead and create our next worksheet where we learn how to calculate straight time hours, overtime hours, double time hours, and then add those all up to calculate the gross earnings. Let's go ahead and do a calculation to find out the gross pay for each of these situations, which would actually, these line numbers would be individuals receiving this pay. So we'll take a look at line 1 or employee number 1. And that one's been done for you already, but I'll go ahead and click on the formula so that you can see how that came together. So the straight time hours, you went through and looked at Quizlet, and that tells you that straight time hours are just the straight, generally 40 hours or less per week times the hourly wage. So this is no overtime, no double time, just regular pay. So the straight time pay then is simply the hourly wage times the number of hours worked, or the number of hours worked times the hourly wage. Same calculation. The overtime pay, and you will recall from your study in Quizlet that overtime is time and a half, or 1.5 times the regular hourly wage. So what we've done here is that our overtime pay for this formula, and we have to use parentheses to make sure that we control the order of operations. So 1.5 times the hourly wage, and so our parentheses will force us to get that product first, and then we can multiply that product times the number of overtime hours that were actually worked. And so once you do that, that's how you get $56.25 in overtime pay. And then your double time pay is just as it sounds. It's your pay times 2, your hourly wage times 2. And so we do a similar formula here. In parentheses, 2 times the hourly wage times the number of double time hours. And that's where we get that 200. And then our gross earnings are simply adding up straight time pay plus overtime pay plus any double time pay. And that's how we came up with that. We'll go ahead and do the next one with you. Straight time pay. 40 hours worked. It's $16.80 an hour. overtime pay, parenthesis, 1.5 times the hourly wage times the number of those overtime hours. In this case, it's that one there, 5 hours, $126. And the double time pay. And the double time pay, oh, I think you have 0 in yours. So it's 0, but we still want to go in and put the formula in anyway, and we will see the reason why. So, equal sign, parenthesis, double time is going to be 2 times our hourly rate. So we have 2 times $16.80 per hour, located in C7, times the number of those hours, which is located in G2. And so that gives us our 0. And then gross earnings is going to be straight time plus overtime plus double time. Now, even though there are 0 hours there, we want to put the formula in because it could be either a mistake was made, or if at some point we want to calculate some double time hours, we can simply type in the number of those hours, and our formulas will automatically update and recalculate our gross earnings. So go ahead and finish these, and once again, don't use any shortcuts until you've done at least, get through at least line 10. Make sure you have this down, understand it, have it memorized, and then if you want to use your skills, your Excel skills, to do some fills or copies to get the worksheet done a little quicker, feel free to go ahead and do that. But make sure you've done enough practice that you can calculate this and do it on your own, so when that test comes around, you've got it down. We'll go ahead and stop here. We'll move on to the page 3 problems in the next video. So thanks for watching, and good luck with all of that.